welcome today. My name's Zoe Kilb. I'm the head of grant operations at Youth Music. I'll just give a little description of myself. So I'm a middle-aged woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I've got purple framed glasses on. So really big welcome to today. Before we start, I'll just run through a few access things. So closed captions are on should you need them. Please keep your mics muted unless you're speaking. Very welcome to have your screens on and off, whatever you need to feel comfortable. Our presenters today will all be describing ourselves, and if there's any sort of relevant images on our slides that we need to describe, we'll do that as well. If you have any technical difficulties, you can put a message in the chat and my colleague Phoebe will do their best to help. So just a quick intro to Youth Music to those who are new to us. So we're a national charity, and our sort of mission is we help marginalised babies, children and young people to make music and monetise music. So every year we raise £10 million to fund inspirational grassroots creative projects and support aspiring young creatives up and down the UK. And we also campaign to break down barriers for babies, children and young people facing inequity, exclusion and discrimination. And we're a national charity funded thanks to the National Lottery via Arts Council England, Players of People's Postcode Lottery and support from other partners, fundraisers and donors. And just to sort of mention, because you might have spotted our name, Youth Music, as per our latest sort of funding agreement with Arts Council England, we've started to fund wider than music. So we now have some funding programmes which fund other art forms and areas of creativity. On to today. Taking a look at the sign-ups, we can see a variety of reasons for people wanting to join and come along. So there's just people who are interested in finding out about our Energiser Fund, lots of people who work with early years and are looking to develop their practice, people who are already doing co-creation or youth voice with this age group and are just interested in adding to their practice, and then people who are sort of new to this way of working and want ideas to get started. So we're hoping we can offer something for each of those groups to take away today. So I'm going to give an overview of the Energiser Fund, and then Groundswell Arts, who's here today with us, will talk more about the fund's learning community and the research that's coming out of it. And then we will have some time for some questions at the end of the session. We've got quite a lot of information we want to share with you, so we'll try and keep as much time as possible. But there are a lot of people on the call today, so just to sort of help us out is, as questions come up for you, if you can put them in the chat, and then what we'll do is we'll sort of collate them together and answer as many as we can at the end of the session. And if we aren't able to answer all the questions, we will provide contact details so you can follow up with us post-meeting, or we'll follow up with you. And then just to confirm, we will be sharing the slides after the meeting, along with a few other resources and useful links. We're also recording the session, so that'll be available on our YouTube channel after the meeting. And then just sort of the aim of today is really to share the learning from our Energiser Fund so far. It's not going to be a workshop on this is how you co-create with young children, this is the way you listen to young children, or this is the definitive way to do youth voice with early years. And in part, that's because we're only part way through our own learning journey, but also because it's really complicated work that's really dependent on your situation and the children you're working with. But what we are hoping and what we've planned is this is going to offer you lots of food for thought. It's going to offer areas that you can explore and resources, organisations and ideas that might offer you some starting points that you might follow up on or use to reflect on your own practice. So, Energiser Fund is Youth Music's first Beyond Music fund, funding across all types of creativity. When we were designing the fund, we knew we really wanted to focus on early years. We've always funded early years work, but we've always wanted to do more and give this sort of age group a specific focus. And we had a particular set of drivers for the fund, which were really consolidated through research and consultation when we were setting up the fund. And these are equity and inclusion. So we really see this ongoing early years children marginalised in music and arts education policy and resource. Ageism, this bias that means people just don't see the potential of children simply because of their age. Still seeing a lot of outdated approaches that we feel are disconnected from the realities of 21st century society. Technology, AI, cost of living crisis, the wars, the pandemic, babies and toddlers have all been through all of these changes and upheavals, but we don't see them being as the focus of the conversation as much as other age groups. And then also the creative activities on offer to early years children don't always, there's plenty of really great stuff out there, don't always seem to reflect the cultural diversity and range of art forms and genres that make up the modern world and that we know young children are already engaging with at home and in their day-to-day lives. And then what we see is an overriding focus on attainment or school-ready outcomes. Not that we're saying there's necessarily something wrong with thinking about attainment or being school-ready, but really at Youth Music wanting to think about how are children's creative ambitions and well-being needs accounted for within this. And then finally, youth voice. So early years children are not as well represented in youth music's decision-making processes as older age groups. Youth voice is central to our work, and we expect the work we fund and support to prioritise it. But our practice and understanding for how this looks for young children isn't as well developed. So Energiser Fund was set up to challenge and explore these things with a particular focus on children's voices and what that means for this age group. So I just wanted to briefly set the scene at the start, just to situate what we're talking about, or the sort of things we're talking about when we say co-creation. So co-creation being the word the Energiser community chose, preferring it over terms such as co-design or child voice or youth voice. So this is not a definition. This is not a neat and tidy definition of co-creation. It's just a way to try and connect you into what we're talking about today. So when we're saying co-creation, these are the sort of things or areas we're talking about. So work that centres children's voices, knowing that voice comes in a variety of different ways, not just speaking. Work that allows children to influence, so not just giving opinions or being heard, but being able to change things, and involves children and adults working together in some way. And it might involve all or just one of those things in different ways and to different levels. And you might see it linked to other words such as youth voice, child voice, co-design, child-centred, child choice. So this isn't an Energiser Fund definition. It's not even the youth music definition, but just to say, here's the areas we're talking about, the sort of things we're thinking about in the Energiser Fund. So it's a three-year fund, and we're just at the start of year 2. We're supporting 11 organisations who are already experts and leaders in working with this age group and in exploring and addressing these challenges. So we've got Made with Music in Leeds, the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester, Spark Arts for Children in Leicester, Whitnash Nursery in Warwickshire, Bristol Old Vic, Take Art working in Devon and Somerset, Cocoon Music up in North Tyneside, Herd Theatre in Hull, Turned on Its Head in Northamptonshire, Magic Acorns in Great Yarmouth, and Taco in Thamesmead in London. As well as funding, we're bringing them together in a learning community, which is being coordinated by the brilliant team at Groundswell Arts. I'll be talking more about that in a minute, but just to give you an idea of the breadth and diversity of the work and practice that we're supporting. So work is happening in a range of settings, spaces and venues: earlier settings, family hubs, theatres, art galleries, outdoor spaces, a converted shop, libraries. And work is covering a huge range of art forms and ways of being creative. So what's on screen is not an exhaustive list. So just to pick out a few: dance and movement, visual arts, photography, sculpture, storytelling, music, play, technology. And the organisations that we're funding are working with children in lots of different ways. So on the screen is a collection of images of birds, large groups of birds sitting on telephone wires, smaller groups, I think of some geese, a pair of parrots flying across a jungle, birds on their own, birds in formation, birds alongside each other, but, doing their own thing. So Energiser Fund, some work is one-to-one intensive work, some small groups, some are working with family groups, some are working with large groups, such as a whole room in a nursery. And the work, sometimes adults and children are mirroring each other, working alongside each other, sometimes working together on an activity towards a shared purpose, sometimes next to each other but doing their own thing, sometimes children on their own. And I think if these images of the birds were really to carry forward the metaphor I've somehow created for our Energiser Fund work, then there would be different birds in the different groupings. So, a utopia where penguins and flamingos and parrots co-create together. And our projects are being inspired by different things, and their practice is developed through different methods, theories and techniques. This is not an exhausted list. It's just pulling out a few of the examples. So Frobel approach, mosaic approach, the work of star catchers, Reggio, the work of many different researchers and writers and theorists. Our work is informed by the artistic practice of those working there, and people are constantly being inspired constantly by the children, families and practitioners on each project. And also people, building on the expertise and practice that they've built up through years of doing this work and being immersed in it. And each project is exploring and thinking about different things. We've not asked them to all do a cohort study or work in exactly the same way with exactly the same numbers of young people. They're all very unique. So this isn't all of them, but this is just some of the examples of things that people are thinking about in their project. So engaging new families with a theatre, finding out how disabled 2 to 4 year olds experience the world, thinking about how what's discovered through playing with children and families can directly influence a show that's been created, welcoming new families to a gallery, researching how very young children choreograph, attuned music and movement practitioners working one-on-one with families, and then, an experimental sound studio, publishing, broadcasting house and sculpture workshop for 2 to 4 year olds. So each organisation has its own unique project and exploring its own research questions and areas of learning. Groundswell and their research team is then bringing all the learning together. So I'm now going to hand over to Angeline and the research team to talk more about the learning community and the research. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my slides as well. Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Angeline. I'm just going to give a quick description as well. I'm also got shoulder length, or maybe slightly longer than shoulder length, brown hair with a bit of blonde at the side, and wearing red glasses today. I'm a female, and I'm in a sort of room with a fish tank bubbling away behind me, with white walls and a couple of pictures and a red lamp, and my pronouns are she and her. So welcome today. Yes, I'm here from Groundswell Arts, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the Energiser Learning Community role, which we took up just over a year ago, or maybe a year and a half almost in the planning. And we're really excited to share with you more about what we've been doing today. So just to say something about Groundswell Arts, at first, we are an arts charity based in Haringey in North London, and we develop creative projects and programs of all sorts of art forms. And our vision and mission, you can see here on the screen, is a world where all people feel seen, heard and valued, and that we facilitate creative arts experiences that give time and space for children, families, artists and practitioners to connect and see each other in new ways. And just to say a bit about why we wanted to become the learning partner was that the sort of fund really resonated with us in terms of a lot of our work having developed in this age group, and then being sort of expanded into informing older age groups as well. So many of the projects that you can see, the images that you can see on the screen, are projects of ours that began with two-year-olds in a sort of research way and then have developed over the years. So you can see a picture there on the left-hand corner of families hearing a song written for them on our youth music funded Sing Our Story project. You can see on the right hand side a couple of toddlers making a green screen film in our Story Lab project, which was funded through Paul Hamlin with families. Our Lightbox project there, which is an immersive project that tours around to different settings, and also our communication pod in the bottom left, which is an immersive tent full of curious objects for children to explore. And then finally our Dancing Together program on the right-hand corner with a mother and child dancing together. And yeah, as I say, many of our work is, a lot of our work is informed by this age group, and again by that notion of really co-creating with parents, with carers, and with early years practitioners. So really happening in settings, in nurseries, in schools, and in places where family hubs and things where children and families are. So just to tell you a bit about the learning community offer, and I'm just going to reflect a bit on what we did last year. It's evolved slightly this year in terms of what we're doing. But in the first year of the program, we met together monthly online to reflect on practice together as a community. Usually around about 2 people from each organisation coming along to those meetings. We had 2 face-to-face events. We had one in London and a second one at the Whitworth Gallery in Manchester. Each organisation was set up with a mentor who supported their project throughout the year, and they met with them in various ways, some of them in person and some of them online. We had 2 sessions that were designed for sort of training and skills development, and then also we brought together, tried to bring together a team to research and to look at the overall learning of the program, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in the call as well. So just to say a bit about our approach as an organisation, I think it was a really daunting task at the very beginning to bring together all of this learning and really look at how we were going to approach it with such a diverse sector, diverse organisations, diverse learning needs. So what we wanted to do is we felt it was really important to spend time as a community to explore some of the shared values and principles that underpin the work that all of the people coming together have when they're working with early years children. And we were introduced to a concept of Ubuntu, and that was through some work with Alex Tung and Jonathan Barnes of Education for Diversity. And this is an African approach to core values which explores human interconnection. So the words are "I am because you are," and you can see there an image which is some of the phrases that the community have used about that sort of interconnection and how every action that you do has an impact on another human being. So we really have taken that through, and that idea has actually come back up again in other pieces of research and other talks that we've had throughout the year. So it's really resonated with some of the organisations. And during the first year, we reflected across organisations about the what of co-creation. We often spoke of underlying values and principles. So one of the things we did on our first learning event was to draw around our hands and to put a value for each of our fingers. And this image here sort of represents some of the really key values and words that have resonated across the community, things like respect and play, care, joy, curiosity, authenticity, listening, compassion, all of these things. So these are things that we sort of come back to time and time again, and we keep reflecting on, as it's important that we sort of find those ways of connecting across such diverse practice. Just wanted to touch on some of the highlights of the year. So things that have really worked well or things that have really resonated for the community. So we've had a really brilliant, I'm not going to read them all out, but you'll have the slides shared, but we've had a brilliant group of mentors that have been linked to different partners. And these have been a variety of individuals and also academics and organisations that have really worked in a bespoke way with different organisations' learning needs. We had 2 sessions with Dr. Shaddai Tembo, which explored IDEA, which was inclusion, diversity, equity and access. And he's got a specific specialism around anti-racism in the early years. And we did quite a lot of work with him looking at individual organisations, IDEA kind of policies and where they wanted to develop in that work. And also an introduction to a concept of video interactive guidance, which is a strengths-based tool for using video for peer observation in the early years. And this was led by Liz Clark from Turned on Its Head. One of the things that's really important to the learning community has been the sort of doing and learning through experiencing and feeling. And this is some images here from some of our events. So the first image on the left with people dancing and moving and using, I think they're using lids and tape on the floor and red blocks and scarves in a movement session, which was led by Mafe Toledo at Triangle Children's Centre in Haringey, in our home base here. And then the other images you'll see are from Whitworth Art Gallery. So we have some practitioners from the Energiser Fund exploring clay, exploring an atelier space, which was created in one of the galleries by Whitnash Nursery, and also a dance workshop led by Africat, so with a partner working with the Whitworth Gallery. This year, as we move into year 2, there's a sense of really having explored the what of co-creation and now wanting to explore the how. And now that the community sort of got to know each other, it's built momentum, we've started to really understand and know each other's practice a little bit more, and we want to go deeper. So we're centering on three main themes in year 2, and that is the IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity and access, and then also child voice and pedagogy. And in our online sessions, we're inviting provocations from partners and practitioners, both within the community but also beyond the learning community as well. And we're begun to explore the use of something called the focused conversation method, ORID, which is an awful acronym, but sounds it's objective, reflective, interpretive and decisional questions. And this method is supporting us to go much deeper in our reflections as we talk together and meet regularly. And just a little image here again from the Whitworth Gallery of a visual illustration of our discussions around co-creation. And as Zoe said at the beginning, I think really what we've learned is it's very contextual, but there are also lots of common underlying principles and approaches. So again, you see those words around values, freedom, time, space, and some of these themes recurring right from the beginning of the community towards the end of the first year. And just finally, some of the things that we're currently exploring. We've just finished our first event of the year, which was held at the Bristol Old Vic. So some images below there of practitioners exploring sound and instruments, VR headsets, drawing and mark making on the floor, and a big parachute to sing a lullaby at the end of the day. And we're really talking about this like inclusive practice. We had a really interesting talk about artistic practice as a valid form of research and becoming comfortable in the creative arts to see ourselves as researchers, something that I think is really key to this early years work. We're talking a lot about the decolonisation of research, so who's telling the story, whose words are we listening to, who are we being informed by, and what are those forms of knowledge that we're valuing. Cultural competency, so really being curious and really looking at the way we investigate and see culture, positionality and power, the role of families as co-creators, so lots of different views around how we engage and work with families and sort of having those debates and discussions. And then also the social model of disability. And some of the sessions here are led by one of the fabulous partners, Made with Music, who are really leading and sharing their thinking in that area and really influencing the practice to sort of really think about when we're talking about 2 to 4 year olds, how are we truly being inclusive in the work that we're doing. So I am going to hand on to one of our research team, to Jen Raven, who's going to tell you a bit more about the research team and the work that they've been doing.
Thank you so much, Angeline. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen, and I'm a white woman with longish red hair. I'm wearing a light blue jumper and have a light yellow background, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to describe how we've been planning and delivering the research. I've been working in collaboration with Angeline to lead the research element of Energiser. And then I feel very lucky to also be working with Vanessa, who joined us back in May to pick up where I left off for maternity leave. And Vanessa then led the year 1 thematic analysis and a literature review. And we're continuing to work together through years 2 and 3. And we're supported by Arissa, who is research assistant, a role we created with the aim of opening up new opportunities for early career researchers and evaluators. Can I have the next slide, please, Angeline? So our brief as a research team was to firstly create an overarching research question, to produce a literature review and a thematic analysis, which Vanessa will introduce you to shortly. And the next one, please. In terms of the overarching question, this is what we arrived at. What do we learn when exploring co-creation with children aged 2 to 4, their families, artists, practitioners, and communities? And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. And within this broad question, Youth Music also defined the 3 questions below with the aim of moving towards articulating Energiser practice and approaches to a wider audience, So what is co-creation? How do we do it? And why do we do it? Or what happens as a result? And then just to say a little more about that overarching question, in the spirit of co-creation, we developed it in a collaborative and iterative way with the learning community over the course of several sessions and a feedback process. It was intentionally very broad because we were conscious it was early in the process and it was important to allow time and space for learning to emerge. We wanted to stay open to different possibilities and exploration. And it needed to be an umbrella question that gave space for the specific and specialised research happening within each of the 11 projects. There was healthy debate along the way about words and the importance of the language we choose. And we decided together on co-creation as being a term most people were happiest with, whilst acknowledging its pros and cons. And there were also several values behind how we set up the research, which Angeline has already touched on. So honouring different ways of knowing, the different ways of doing and presenting research, particularly not always being word-based and leaning into the experiential approaches, and really thinking about how to best keep children in the foreground in a genuine and ethical way. Whilst we've been taking a bird's eye view of all of the projects collectively, we've been really mindful that each project has its own specific research focus, and the things that people are exploring are incredibly varied and evolving as the programme progresses. But broadly speaking, at the start, the majority of areas for exploration related to one or more of these themes. So the environment in which co-creation is happening, approaches to listening, noticing and attuning when working with 2 to 4-year-olds, children's development, as Angeline has mentioned, approaches to inclusivity, diversity, equity and access, particularly specific frameworks like the social model of disability, how people experience and express creativity, child voice and what we learn from children, the role and involvement of families and the wider community associated with a project, and technological innovations. And to look at these things, each project is using research and evaluation tools that work for them and their projects. So there were no prescribed tools or methods. And again, these were incredibly varied, ranging from participatory and creative methods with children and families to reflective practice and journaling, academic methods, focus groups, and scale-based questions or surveys. And then lastly, to help us as the Groundswell team to collate all of the learning, we've been facilitating research-focused activities at learning community online and in-person events, reviewing interim reports submitted to youth music, visiting projects, and drawing on social media posts and creative media produced by projects. And all of that said, I'm going to hand over to Vanessa to share more of what we discovered in year 1.
Hi everybody, I'm Vanessa. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with shoulder-ish length wavy brown hair, and I've got glasses and silver hoop earrings on today. So I wanted to start with the image that's on the screen of a cat's cradle made of string being held by 2 hands. Because I found a quote from Jeanette Winterson's novel Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit that says, "Some people say there are true things to be found. Some people say all kinds of things can be proved. I don't believe them. The only thing for certain is how complicated it all is, like string full of knots. It's all there, but hard to find the beginning and impossible to fathom the end. The best you can do is admire the cat's cradle and maybe knot it up a bit more." Which really resonated with me for, well, any research process. actually, but I like the knottiness of the analogy, and particularly for this Energiser project, the idea that actually cat's cradle doesn't mean anything until another person comes with another set of hands to take that string and change it into a different shape. So as the rest of the team have said, there's spectacular variety in the sorts of projects and contexts. But we've tried to find some sort of common threads. But as part of the sort of overview of outputs of this project, there will also be case studies and other things that will sort of pick up the specificities of each individual project, as the teams have said. So one sort of important thread seemed to be around the open-endedness of this process, and the sense of embracing curiosity and possibility thinking, asking what if. And in common with a lot of these threads, this goes across that whole ecosystem of the project. So it's recognising and valuing the child's curiosity, but it's also about the artists and practitioners asking what if, being curious about practice, about the organisations being curious about ways of working, about youth music's curiosity in setting up the fund. And that brings with it an inherent sort of riskiness if you don't know what's going to happen. And again, that's risky for children to possibly come into an unknown space, to not know how your idea will be received. It's risky for practitioners and organisations who are used to, sort of having to perform or teach in certain ways, and particularly maybe more defined ways. So for each theme, I also just wanted to illustrate in the words and makings of the partners who can communicate far better than I. So I've chosen for each theme a word collage that I have made using the partners' words from across conversations, their reports, their writings, our meeting notes. So these word collages are built of the words of all the partners. So this is one that says, "The outcome will always be different, non-linear and expansive. Messy, but with pathways through. There is no right or wrong. Navigating the unknown, messy, uncertain, risky. Wild at times, looks chaotic, nerve-wracking, not scary, but confronting." And also to share, this is another one. "Castles inhabited, skyscrapers built, oceans weaved. Blue fabrics waved like ocean currents, bubble wrap and crepe paper, texture to our underwater world, large cardboard mermaid tails. A room transformed through collective action. Whatever we create belongs to us all. Some art, a game, or just an energy." And at our most recent session in Bristol, at the recent face-to-face event, we made together some collages in response to this question around co-creation. And this is one, partners, that I think captures the idea of open-endedness beautifully. So there's a black piece of cardboard with lots of different coloured circle stickers on it. There's some string, and then pieces of wire come up from the cardboard to build a sort of pyramid with lots of different coloured pom-poms and bits of ribbon and pipe cleaners and other things connecting together. So another sort of important thread was this idea that's been mentioned of being sort of collaborative and seeing children as competent or as experts. And there was sort of a feeling that wasn't something necessarily that was always recognised. And the sort of importance of sharing power between all the people involved in the project. and that the practice is responsive and attuned. So it's not just collaborative in the sense of a sharing of labour, of I do this part and you do this part, but there's a sort of reciprocity and a contingency that what I do is tied to what you do, which I guess comes back to kind of Angeline's point about Ubuntu. And that this is all sort of informed by a practice of noticing, observing and listening to each other, and particularly to children. And I think this was one of the places, where youth voice with older children maybe shouldn't always rely so much on words, but particularly for in an early years context, that it's very much about observing as well, movement, gesture, mark making, art, all of those sorts of things. And also the practice for artists of noticing oneself. And that really reflected deep practice and saying, oh, why does that feel uncomfortable for me? Why am I curious about that? And these are some more words of the partners. Who is a participant and who is a facilitator? We spend time together, time to talk, time to build trust, building relationships. Interactions emerge, a reciprocal relationship, bouncing back and forth, a circle of working hands, strongly connected. And another collage from the event in Bristol that there is the word tower and the word voice are written in red text on white paper in the largest font. And there's a story here about a list of materials that an artist had that has been left on a shelf, and a child takes it and the artist says, do you know where the list is? And the child said, yes, it's in my lunchbox. And the artist said, can I have it back? The child says, no. The artist says, could I look at the list if I put it back? The child said, yes. And I think this story at the event in Bristol resonated with lots of people, and it raises lots of interesting questions as well about how, that story would be interpreted differently by different people with different lenses, and sort of having to live your values of co-creation, and how this is actually, in this context, a great thing. And one... So I think so far this raises a couple of practical questions. If I think about my work and other people that I've worked with, I think some of the sort of barriers when we start talking about these things that come up are, how do we manage these conflicting ideas then? Because if we're talking about, freedom and open-endedness, you might have, in a say musical context, which is my background primarily, one child that wants to explore a particular instrument in a really noisy way. And so you as a practitioner, don't want to be the person to say, no, you have to play that properly or nicely. But equally, there might be somebody else in the group who, for whom that noise is kind of really distressing. And so managing those sorts of things. And I think kind of articulating what that looks like will potentially be something really useful this year. And also whether some children noticed more than others. One of the partners wrote in their reflections, it's helped us to be more attuned to all children. Some actions may be bigger, louder, or command more attention, but through noticing, we can tune into the more subtle too. And I think that's potentially a really interesting area to say more about. So please, pop in the chat or ask questions if either of those questions sort of resonate for you or people that you've worked with. So in order to take risks, to be open-ended and to engage in collaborative and equitable interactions, there seemed to be a thread that everyone involved needs to have this sense of safety, and that building trust is really, really important. And that's for anyone, but particularly where we're working with children and families who might have experienced exclusion, trauma, or a range of sort of adverse experiences. So as as the team have mentioned variously across the partners, some people are working with trauma-informed practice, a social model of disability, anti-racism, various kind of different threads. And again, this idea of trust goes across the ecosystem, I think, that children need to trust that the adults will value their contributions if they're going to offer those. That the adults working together need to trust each other, the artists and the organisations, the management, the organisation and the funders. It's really that whole ecosystem. And another part of building that relationship is developing shared values, particularly when people involved in the project come in maybe with different expectations, the sort of importance of communication and working through those. And that's also kind of fostered by a sense of familiarity and some sort of ritual elements. In the words of the partners. It's the constant turning up for people, the familiar environment, healing spaces. It's a constant turning up for people, welcoming and closing, a sanctuary. It's a constant turning up for people, tea, coffee, snacks, rituals. It's a constant turning up for people, embedded in everyday rhythms. And this is one partner's collage that has a number of small words and pieces of string and feathers and photos. But the 4 words in the largest font are fragile, care, belong, and home. And another collage, again with some postcards with small text, some photos, a piece of paper with words looping around on, but 3 larger text words that highlights that sort of web. So it says child-led, artist-facilitated, and parent-empowered. And sitting under all of that is an idea of the space that's necessary to make this happen. So time is so important. I think everyone's found in this project to get to know people, to observe, to think, to build things together. But it's also about a space that has a sense of freedom from the expectation to produce or the weight of meeting deadlines or working with sort of preconceived ideas, which again raises more questions, as any research ever does, about, well, firstly, how to provide that time. There's big questions. There was another exchanging notes session last week. I don't know if anyone was at that, but about supporting and caring for artists, which I think is a really important part of this work as well. And this is the words of some of the partners. Sitting with the slowness, unhurried in a hurried world, a thoughtful approach, slow, steady work. Spacious, a breathing out, small moments of joy. It's taken a while. I think the thing that I've sort of taken away from this as well has been this web, this ecosystem of everything that's happening around the project. And which I think is potentially sort of one useful thing to think about, and always thinking in this sort of co-creation process, okay, but how did we get here? And who from this web has been involved? And how can we go back one stage in time and think even more about how to sort of involve everyone from the beginning? And there's always a real world aspect, because in early years music, I imagine there will be people probably on this call who will be thinking, yeah, that's great, but I get paid to do 30 minutes in Caterpillar's class and 30 minutes in Butterfly's class. So I think, thinking about how to manage that is obviously, another spectacularly big question. So I will leave it there. But I would be really interested to hear everyone's thoughts.
Hi, thanks so much, Vanessa, and thanks, Angeline and Jen. So you can see so much thinking and explorations been going on, and we don't come with precise answers or any answers to things, but more the things that we've been noticing and exploring, and the common things that are coming up through the work that we've been supporting. There aren't any. What am I saying? There aren't any questions in the chat, but if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask something or offer their own reflection on what we've shared today, we've got about another 10 minutes. So I will just let the Zoom silence sit for a moment, see if I can spot. We've stunned you all into silence. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. So given the many research methods used in the projects and the complexities of practice you have outlined, how do you begin to pull together themes? And are the themes agreed on in advance? So that was from Stephanie Williams.
Do you want to take? Yeah. Do you want to take that one, research team?
I think the short answer is with great difficulty. The themes weren't agreed on in advance. So, yeah, it was a sort of process of constructing themes. I'm still getting out of the habit of talking about themes emerging, because they don't. We construct them. A messy and reflective process of Miro boards and Post-its and doodles. And I mean, there is massive complexity, and I think that's why it's important that they sit beside the sort of case studies as well, that sort of pick up the much more sort of context specific. I don't know, Jen, sorry, that feels a really inadequate answer. But yeah, to answer the easier part of the question, are the themes agreed on in advance? No, they weren't this year.
I think it'd be like, one thing to say is that we've just presented sort of the initial stage thematic analysis, and part of the presentation of that was to ask the community what was missing, did it resonate? So there is a sort of an element of co-creating the research with the community as well. So I think if they really didn't agree with the themes, I think they would definitely say so, but also that there were things that came up. I think joy, there was a quite robust debate around the word joy and what that means for the community. So I think there are things that people are sort of saying need to be more highlighted or don't resonate as well. But yeah, I think it is very iterative in terms of the themes. It's been quite an iterative process of just trying to like as a web of connections is a good description. Cat's cradle at the beginning is exactly what it is like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've definitely changed my mind about some things even since we talked about it in Bristol 2 weeks ago. And I think everyone will, and it will, as we go through year 2 and the whole sort of thing comes together, it will start to hopefully make a different type of sense as well.
Thank you. Was there anyone else who had an observation? I've just seen that Jenny posted in the chat, just acknowledging, love the creative approach and the openness. This work is so important. And then we've got Kazia. What do you think needs to happen for creative research like this to have the most impact within academia? Just quite a big question, but we're up for those.
Shall I attempt to take this?
Go for it.
I think academia is probably a broad thing. And I think at the risk of making the question even more difficult, I'd open it up beyond academia, because there are people at one. It's not a battle and it's not a spectrum. But there obviously are corners of academia that are not interested in anything that can't be put into a graph, and then there's swathes of sort of very qualitative, creative, arts-based methods, participatory methods. I think it's broadening it out actually even more, so that towards other types of funders and policy and things like that, which is, you could have a week-long symposium on how to do that. But yeah, I think academia itself is so broad. That doesn't answer the question at all. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer either, but was just thinking quite practically about it, that there are some projects with academic partners where those kind of intersections might start to happen, and that space to see what happens when research like this meets a more academic context.
I think that one of the things that we were quite interested in was that mix of knowing that there were organisations that had people with PhDs in early years and really high levels of academic backgrounds, whereas others that had come from maybe a very different art form background or didn't have the same in-depth history of sort of studying early years. And it was about how their forms of knowledge could become valid forms of research as well. And I think that's one of the things we've really tried to be thinking about the whole time, is how to kind of have everyone embrace the sort of embrace seeing themselves as researchers, and that kind of other forms of Indigenous knowledge has been one of them that we were talking about in Bristol. We heard from an academic that spoke about knowledge from the Lakota tribes. I've talked a lot about Te Whāriki, which is the New Zealand curriculum, which is a bilingual curriculum that's founded on Indigenous knowledge. So I think we've also been talking about other forms of knowing and other forms of wisdom that maybe sit outside academia sometimes as well, and you're kind of trying to bring those worlds together a lot more, which I think lots of researchers do. So I think it's been a thread of kind of what we've been trying to look at in the Energiser as well.
Are you expanding the project in year 2 or continue to work with the same partners, or both? So the Energiser Fund, it's 3-year funding. So we're working with the same organisations over the 3 years, and at the moment it's just a one-off fund. But but it's really important to youth music that this work this is just the start of us sharing it more widely. So it's not just contained to the learning community, and that we're really thinking about how it filters into the rest of the work and our other funding. And our other funding programs. But yeah, the Energiser Fund's sort of set with those 11 organisations at the moment. Cool. We've just got 3 minutes left. My colleagues popped a quick evaluation survey if you want to give any feedback for us. I don't think we've got any other questions, so I'd just like to really thank Angeline, Jen and Vanessa for sharing today. And just before we sign off, to say we will be sharing the slides and the recording with you. The year 1 research, once we've got it into this finalised, we will share that as well. We've also will be able to share the co-creation sort of literature review resource, which gives lots of useful links to follow and explore. And with the slides and the recording, I'll send the organisation's websites and social media. So I think if you're thinking about this work is just following organisations who are working in those places, following them on social media, checking out their websites is just a great starting point for getting going with this work. And with that, there'll be contact details if you want to reach out to us with further questions. Yeah, and this is the research from year 1. There's going to be more stuff coming from year 2 and year 3, and we're really thinking about the resources or the things that we can put out that can support others to engage with this work, but also knowing that it is really complicated work that's probably not going to have a really simple definition or a simple methodology. Do this and then you've co-created, or you're listening to children's voices. But this is exciting and important, and I think that's the joy in the work as well, is the diversity and that it's not fixed. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Do please stay in contact with us, sign up to our mailing list. But thank you all for coming.